In light of the current recent events, I think it is extremely important for us to have this conversation to discuss how to teach children about safety boundaries with their bodies, to be better prepared as a community to prevent abuse from happening. And as such, for this special episode, we are very lucky to have Mrs. Debbie Fox. Debbie is the founder and creator of the internationally recognized safety kid program Magen Yeladim. Debbie has facilitated a unique partnership between schools, families, and children to create a safer world for our community's youngest members at home, school, and at camp. Guided by her passion for keeping children safe, she established Magen Yeladim Child Safety Institute in 2013 and currently serves as its director, consulting throughout the world on abuse prevention and intervention. Debbie is a licensed social worker and lectures frequently and has published within her areas of expertise. Her work as a consultant has been utilized by the county and state agencies in the areas of child, family, and cross-cultural sensitivity training, for which she has received letters of honor and recognition. So really want to thank you so much, Debbie, for taking the time on such short notice to talk about such an important topic. And really a thank you. And, all of us educators, we really appreciate your time. So thank you.
I'm
So
happy to participate.
amazing. So first things first, what inspired you to create Magen Yeladim?
Well, the truth is that I'd say about maybe close to 15 years ago, when I was the director of a Orthodox program, an Orthodox counseling program here in Los Angeles, and we had a very wonderful and very interactive group of Rabbanim that were what we called our Halachic Advisory Board. And at that time, which was maybe I'm going to say 16 years ago or so, 15 years ago, we had 3 cases of sexual abuse that came to us that were in a very close proximity, maybe 6 months. In those days, it really was not talked about and
Right.
really was shocking.
Mm-hmm.
It was really shocking.
Right. Of course.
And so, yeah. And so the Rabbanim who I used to go through, we used to meet monthly and we'd sit down with them and go through all the cases and situations. Interestingly, at that time, what happened was they said to me, we can't, as one of them I remember saying, we can't say that a bunch of white beards are walking out of a room hearing this and not doing anything about it.
Right.
We need to do something.
Hmm.
And so they put me on it, to
Wow.
figure out how we could do something. We actually connected with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, who were more than happy to help and train us. They gave us a trainer for a year. She did the first training. She helped adapt all of the materials so they could be culturally sensitive. She did our trainings in our schools. Our first trainers went down to Palos Verdes, California, where she was, and she really helped develop the core of the program, which grew from then.
Wow.
And their goal was to help prevent sexual abuse. So the program started with a children's program. That was the first piece that it started with as a response.
And you at the time you said it was started because there was 3 cases in a short span. Do you think that was really the only cases that were going on, or those were just the ones that you were hearing about?
I was sure that there were other things that were going on. It's just that it so happened to be that those 3 cases came in a short period of time, and it became very clear that this was an issue.
Mm-hmm.
These issues were so not talked about at the time.
Right.
And it really became clear to all of the Rabbanim that this is an issue and we are going to deal with it. We started out saying we were going to deal with it with our own city. We weren't thinking about anybody else at the point. And as we were still in the formation of the program, we got a call from another city that had a situation of, in that city, it happened to have been a rabbi who was involved with and then showing it to kids and that kind of thing. He was arrested for child pornography,
Mm.
and the school, we didn't even finish the program, but the school was like,
Wow.
you have to get out here right away. We need help. And
Wow. Oh, wow.
that's what happened, was just like literally before. I have never advertised the program ever.
Really?
Never.
So how did it just everyone as things have come up, people were just like, oh, you need to speak to Debbie Fox. You need to speak to Magen Yeladim.
That
Wow.
kind of thing is what's happened. Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible.
Mhm.
So the mission of Magen Yeladim, as you know, on your website, it says it's to provide a protective safety net for children through preventing the incidence of child abuse, intervening effectively with cultural sensitivity when abuse occurs, and providing avenues and resources for ongoing support to promote healing for those children and their families. That's a lot. There's a lot going on there. Take me through each of these. How do you accomplish these incredible, amazing goals that are so necessary?
So the first piece that we do, I'm going to see if I can try to explain it this way, and with the kind of what we provide in each environment and then how we provide it.
Mm-hmm.
And so what our premise is that it takes a community to protect a child. It also takes a community that allows abuse.
Mm.
And if we don't all work together so that there are no gaps, then we're in a community that allows abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And so what does that mean? So what we start with is, we start with schools within communities. That's where we start. And what we do is we start with educating the administration. And we focus with administration on creating a safe environment in the school. So that means environmental issues and supervision and in different places within the school.
Right,
It
right.
means making sure that you know that you've taught your teachers what are
Mm-hmm.
professional boundaries with the students. It includes safe hiring practices. Are you really looking into each of the people that you're hiring,
Right,
or
right.
are we passing problems along,
Sure.
right? So we do a lot with them on creating a safe environment for children. The second thing we do is we go to staff and we do a 2-hour workshop with staff.
Mm-hmm.
Do that workshop with staff. It's very focused on what does a staff need to do in order to help protect children. So one thing we do a lot of, we go over professional boundaries very carefully with staff, but we also talk about how would staff know if you're a Rebbe or you're a Mora or you're a teacher, and how would you have any idea if a child in your class was at risk?
Right.
So we spend
Meaning
a
being
lot of
able to pick
time.
up on cues. Right.
Mhm,
Mm-hmm.
right. So we spend a lot of time with that in helping them so that they know. Now, what would they do if they knew it? If they suspected it?
Right.
How do they then bring that to somebody? When do they have a pink flag? When do they have a red flag?
Mm-hmm.
Those kinds of things. A lot of time with them on, and how, if a report needed to be made, how do they go about doing that?
Mm-hmm.
So we go spend a lot of time with teachers, educating teachers. The third piece of the program is that we educate parents.
Mm.
Our parent program is very practical. We don't do scare tactics. We don't tell them everybody's going to be abused. We don't do
Right,
any of
right.
that. You know, we really focus with them on very practical tools, and most of them involve conversations. How do you
What do you
have
mean? Oh,
conversations
how do you have the conversation? Mm.
with your kids in natural ways? So we do a lot of conversations with kids and a lot of scenarios that could happen, and how do we keep kids in our houses safe,
When you
and
say
how do we.
conversations, you're saying conversations to be able to bring out from them if there's something going on, or not necessarily?
I don't want to get there.
Meaning you're saying conversations to help prevent it, meaning giving them preventative tools. That way they don't even get there in the first place.
Or if they do, that they know, that a child would know, you know what, my parent talked to me about that.
Right, right,
My
right.
parent said that I need to go tell them if this
Mm-hmm,
happens.
mm-hmm.
I just need to do that because my parent is one who knows how to talk about these things.
Right.
what happens in the frum community is so often parents do not bring up the topic with their kids.
Right.
And therefore, what kids learn is other kids talk to them, or if my parent doesn't talk about it, it's pretty scary, or it's not something I can talk about, so they just stay quiet.
Right. There's that taboo. It's unfortunately it still is a little bit of even in the modern Orthodox world, it's also a little bit of a taboo, which is unfortunate because it's becoming less and less. But at the same time, there's still that taboo. It's like, oh, how do we have that conversation? And it's awkward, it's weird, and you don't want to bring it up, and that's what leads to this, unfortunately.
And what you're saying is so true, which is there is a discomfort.
Right.
There's a discomfort. And so what we really focus on is giving people language for having these conversations and tools for having these conversations, so they become a little less frightening for the parents. So
Got
they
it.
feel like they know how to do it.
So what are some of those tools that we can give over?
I'll tell you one that I'm known for. I'm not so sure it's the one I happen to be most famous for. I'm thrilled about, but it is one, is that I often talk to parents of jelly voice, right? So what does that mean? A peanut butter and jelly voice, right? That if I said to your kids, do you want a cream cheese sandwich or a peanut butter sandwich? Do I care what the end result is?
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't. I don't care. It's very calm. Do you want this or do you want that? And what I talk to parents about is your voice has to be that soft, and that when you bring up topics, when children are little, when they're getting out of the bath and you want them to put on a towel because you don't want them to run around the house that way, you say really softly, oh, you need to wear a towel. Those are your private parts. We don't walk around like that. We keep them private. But you bring it up in ways, and then when it comes to sensitive discussions, it's important to have those same sensitive discussions in that same. Can I tell you a story?
Please.
That might. Okay. I have a good friend who's a psychologist, and we work together on different things throughout the years. And he's heard me speak several times. I've heard him speak many times. We kind of go back and forth as colleagues. And one day, maybe it was 2 or 3 years ago, he calls me up and he's like, Debbie, I'm not calm. I was like, what? Like, I'm not calm. I'm in my car. I'm not calm. I said, what happened? He said, well, you told me to have these discussions, and I'm in this calm discussion. Like you tell everybody how to discuss these things with calm. And I'm having this calm discussion with my son about, we play games with private areas of the body, and we never keep secrets with the private areas of the body. And we don't play games at home. We don't play games at school. I'm saying everything you said. We play a game like that. And his father said, what do you mean? And he said, me and my 2 sisters, we play a game with our private parts. And he said, oh, I have to go now. I'll be back. And he said, he got into his car and he called me and he goes, I'm not calm. I can't deal with it. I am not calm. And so I said, do you have any idea what game they're playing? No, I just know I'm not calm. And he was just like, and so I said to him, you know what? You have to go back. You have to meet with your wife alone, having a calm conversation, sit down at the table, put out some cookies, and say, Shlomi said that there was a game that you guys were playing. Can we talk about that?
Right.
It's just that they get to the table and they practice this voice going back and forth. And when they got to the table, his wife had a jar of peanut butter on the table. He told me that anytime voices went up, the jar of peanut butter went across the table. Baruch Hashem, it was not nearly as complicated as he thought. It was a real opportunity for education.
Wow, that's amazing. That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. So how do you then accomplish these goals? So you're saying you meet with each of these different parties, and you're giving them over those skills and those tools.
Now,
What?
I wanted to just bring one thing up. The piece I
Sure.
didn't bring up was that lastly, after the parents, we do the kids.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so you meet with kids
So,
also. Okay,
yes,
directly.
so it's administrators, adults need to be a shield for the children.
Right.
It's the adults' responsibility to keep the kids safe. But we do teach the kids the skills. And the most important skill we teach the kids is that no matter what happens, they need to tell a parent or a trusted adult to make sure that if something did happen, it can be stopped. Or if they have an uncomfortable feeling, that it can be paid attention to.
Right. 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 Okay, that's very important. And I also saw that you have different programs. You have a Safety Cape program, a Seminary Savvy, Project Safe Camp. What are the differences between these programs, and I guess what do these programs look like?
Okay, so this that I just talked about is our safety kit program,
Okay.
right? What
Mm-hmm.
we do is we provide train the trainers very often in different cities. Let's say Cleveland, uh, different areas of New York do have it, where we provide a train the trainer. We have these fabulous trainers in that city, and they provide the program we just talked about,
Mm-hmm.
the administrative staff, parent, and children's program in their city every year.
Oh,
And
wow.
they work together doing that as a group. They go to all their schools and they do that. We have a group in Mexico City that does, so it's
That does
really
what?
amazing.
Sorry, you cut out a second. You said in Mexico City.
We have an incredible program, and they do 5,000 children every year.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow, that's
incredible.
incredible.
So that's the safety
This is
kit.
through Magen Yeladim. This is all.
I Right. I train them, and then they do it themselves every year. I
Wow.
don't I don't go back every year.
Got it.
Then there are smaller communities and schools that will call me, and I'll bring a team and just do their own school.
Mm-hmm.
They don't, let's say Milwaukee or South Bend or whatever. We don't do a
Sure.
train trainer so they can do it every year, but they have called like every 2 or 3 years, and we go back.
Gotcha. Wow. 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 That's amazing. Incredible
Mhm.
work. So what you mentioned that there's the tools that you speak to educators about and to the adults about. What are some of those concrete things that you talk about that are important for parents to know, for kids to know, for educators to know, for Abanim to know? If you could break them down for us, give us those tools and skills, especially for those parties. So important for us to hear. What are those main things? I know you said like the peanut butter and jelly boys. That's awesome. I love that. What are some other things that the concrete things that parents should know, kids should know, educators and Rabbanim should know?
Okay. So I'm gonna, if it's okay with you, I'll break it down a little bit, and then hopefully, if I'm off target, you'll keep me on a little bit.
Sure.
Is different than that for educators because rabbis have different roles.
Mm-hmm.
When we do a training for Rabbanim, which I do, which is difficult because a lot of Rabbanim prefer male speakers, but I
Sure.
would say that it has easier.
Right.
I'd say it
Right.
has gotten easier. But when we do that, we do talk about professional roles, even for a Rav. We do even talk about, I do a whole unit with them on the whole concept of charisma and how they use charisma and understanding the dynamics of women in their
Mm,
communities.
interesting.
Um, right. And then we talk a lot about keeping their community safe in terms of shul safety,
Mm-hmm.
safety in their
I
own
feel like
shul.
youth departments also.
Mhm.
That's a hot that's an area where there's so many youth, and there's a youth director and there's youth leaders who are totally in control. And how do we set that up as a safe environment? That's
Right. So we talk about that. We also do a unit with them on keeping their own families safe
hmm.
because the Rav and his wife are often working when they are in shul,
Mm.
and their children are, so to speak, unsupervised.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great
And
point.
so we talk about how, and also they may have a lot of people at their own home
Mm-hmm.
as guests. So we talk about how to keep their own families safe.
Right, right.
Right. And so that's a lot of what we do with Rabbanim. In
And when you
terms
said
of,
when you said charisma, what do you mean by that? Meaning that they to try to have them tone it down a little bit because of what that could lead to, or
Not necessarily. Somebody could have charisma and utilize their charisma, but it's important for Rabbanim to be aware of the impact of charisma on
uh-huh.
women.
Oh, interesting.
And right. And be aware of that and um, getting too when is it getting too tight? When
Mm-hmm.
is it being blurred a little?
Uh-huh. Got it. Got it.
That conversations, something I often say is, if your wife picked up your phone and just read through your texts, would you be comfortable?
Mm. Wow.
If whatever you're writing, would it
Sure.
be comfortable?
Yeah, that's a
Um,
great point.
yeah, I, for instance, once went to a city and they were in a crisis and they needed me to get to the school quickly. So the rabbi and his wife were supposed to pick me up together, right? And bring me to the hotel. I was going to shower and change and go to the school. One of the rabbi's children ended up having a high fever and his wife couldn't come. So he came alone, which is not something he would usually do or I do.
Right.
And he was going to drop me off at the hotel. I went into the hotel. He stayed in the car. I went in, and the hotel didn't have the reservation. Turned out he made the reservation at a hotel like 20 miles away with the same name.
Oh.
So he said there was a hotel next door. I said, fine, let me walk. I'm fine. So I walked over there. I made the reservation there. I said, go on back. He was very worried and he felt very badly that he thought he had taken care of everything and whatever. And my inclination was to send a text that said, please don't worry, the hotel is fine.
Right.
And then I said to myself, don't do that.
Right. Right.
Don't do that. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want a text on my phone that is talking to a rabbi talking about a hotel.
Right. Sure. Sure.
And so I figured when I get there, I'll let him know.
Right.
But I think those
Having that
boundaries,
sensitivity. Right. Wow.
right, we have to have them. All of us need to have them.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
But certainly rabbis.
For sure. Okay, so that's Rabbanim. Let's go through. What do you want to do next? Parents or children or educators? You tell me.
Okay, so staff members, I think we talked a lot about.
Hmm.
Okay with that?
With you're saying with educators?
Right.
Yeah. Well, so I guess to get a little more specific in terms of like, I'm an educator myself. And I often meet with students. My colleagues, we all meet with students. What are some of those things, those concrete things that just for other educators? I know some of the classic things, like obviously you never meet with a student in a room that has no window or that in a but are there any other things that are not, I guess, as classically known that would be good for us to go through?
I would just, for educators, be careful about making sure that whatever your interaction is with a child is professional, that you're in your professional role. So one thing males should ever be discussing, um, female female students in terms of their bodies, even their uniforms, any of that should be handled by females.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
In this
completely agree.
day and age, even if you're walking in as a Rebbe or whatever, I would say that you need to go to a female teacher and have them deal with that.
Right. It's interesting because
Um,
in one of the schools that I worked in, I as a Rebbe was asked to be on the committee who was the dress code committee, and basically telling the person who oversees it all, if there is someone who is violating it. And I said I'm not comfortable being on that committee because why should I be looking at girls in that way? That's inappropriate. That whether they're my students or not, either way, I shouldn't have to be looking at it to see, oh, that's not a skirt that's okay for school, and then I'm going to report that. Like as a rabbi, as a male, I shouldn't be looking at that. When I told the person who was heading that committee, they're like, totally respect that, take you off of it, no worries at all. But it's interesting that was even like a Havamina in the first place.
right, right, absolutely. And something I talk a lot to teachers about is overstepping boundaries with children, which is maybe taking a role in a child's life that maybe is too intense, where I've seen this more in girls' schools. I don't know as much that it happens in boys' schools,
Hmm.
but where teachers will get very involved in the girl's life and kind of push the parent out. I've been involved in cases where teachers were calling the girl every single night to say goodnight,
Hmm.
or where
That's
girls were calling the teacher many, many times a night, um, tattling on parents and whatever. So,
mm, wow.
and, or another one that's really important for teachers is when something is a high risk behavior, that's not a secret. So if a child is cutting, if a child is got an eating disorder, if a child has suicidal thoughts and comes to a teacher and says, look, I'm going to tell you, but I don't want you to tell anybody.
Right.
Teacher's not skilled enough in order to handle those things.
Right.
That's not a secret you can keep.
Hmm.
You need to get that child the appropriate help. We've had too many situations where teachers feel so honored by this disclosure that they feel like, you know what, I can take care of it. I'll support you.
Hmm.
There's more going on there.
Right. And teachers also are not professional. They're not social workers necessarily. Sometimes they are, and they're
Right.
not necessarily psychologists, or and therefore they're not able to deal with that in the most proper way, for sure.
Right. And then, of course, really simply, teachers have to be aware, like you say, of where they are physically, where the student is physically, making sure that there's a comfortable distance, what they're talking about with the kids, not talking about anything that's inappropriate that they shouldn't be discussing with kids.
Sure.
All of that, all of those Gedarim should be really careful, not putting yourself into a situation where you're alone with a child in a place where others don't have access.
Right. Right. In terms of going back for a second, in terms of conversations, I guess. So let's say a student is coming to you and talking to you about something, not necessarily not necessarily talking to you about something inappropriate per se, but I guess it's getting towards that place, and you don't want to have that conversation with them, but at the same time, maybe that they need help, or that there's something going on here. What's the best way to react in that situation? That way, you're not pushing them away because there's you want to have that relationship, but at the same time, this is not something that the conversation that you should be having with them.
So what I'm going to say is teachers play an incredibly important role, incredibly important. I'm going to say that, the system like me couldn't do our job without teachers who are doing a good job. But
Right.
we'd sure have a lot more work without teachers who are doing a good job. It's good that kids can come and that often teachers have the ability to be trusted and to guide them in different ways. When it gets to things that are high risk, or they feel are above the emotional kind of risky level of what they're experiencing with the other kids, if they see that it's higher risk, and a child is saying something that to them they feel like any of the areas that we've discussed, or my parents are getting divorced, I can't deal with it, my father did this, my mother did that, I can't handle it anymore, that child needs therapy.
Mm-hmm.
It's good that they're coming to the teacher. Whatever teacher that child is coming to has done a good job,
Right.
right, of
Right.
developing rapport,
Developing a relationship. Right. Sure.
building a relationship. That child needs a teacher that
Mm-hmm.
they can turn to. The issue then is for a teacher to be able to listen and to say, to validate them, to say, thank you, this means so much to me. I hear what you're saying. Um, I think that it would be best if we would get you the help in a different way. I'm happy to make sure that you get that help, but I think maybe you need a therapist who can help you deal with the impact of, let's say, cutting, or let's say
Right.
that your parents divorce, or whatever it may be. I have a brother who's so off the derech and I can't stand it, and it causes so many fights in the house. Let's find somebody. But what they need to hear from you is not you're dumping them, but you're escorting them. You're
Right.
not letting go until
Yeah,
they
that's a
have
great
the right one.
approach. Yeah, that's awesome. That's really helpful. And what would you say about parents? What are some concrete things that parents should?
So I'd say the most important is that as parents, and it's a 2 hour workshop that we do with them, so it's pretty hard to condense. But
Sure.
the important thing is that parents are aware that there's nobody in the world better to talk to their children about anything in relationship to their body than their parent.
Mm-hmm.
And that we really do have to get over that sensitivity or that hesitation about talking about it. The earlier we start, when we could identify body parts to them when they're in a bath and they're 2 or 3, they don't know the difference. They just learn that
Right. Mm-hmm.
that's what it is. But
Interesting. Right.
as we take these windows of opportunity as they grow older and we teach them different things, the different things. What I often say to parents is, let's say you really didn't talk about it. You never had a conversation with your kid, right?
Right.
And then your kid's about to go to camp and you go and you take them and you buy them a bathing suit and you say something like, hey, I never did have a conversation with you about body safety, did I?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Let, let's talk about some of the things that would be important. I went to camp too, and there was all kind of stuff that happened in camp.
Mm-hmm.
So let's kind of go over the rules of body safety.
Mm-hmm.
So it's taking those windows of opportunity.
Right. That's great. Yeah, that's a really great point.
I
What
want to
age?
bring up one other parental point, if it's okay, because it's
Please,
so important.
please, please, please. Yeah.
And that is for parents to really teach children about when they have an uncomfortable feeling
Mm.
and that parents model it. Like if a parent is comfortable with something, that they say, I don't think I want to do that. I'm uncomfortable with that.
Mm.
Um, I'll come up with I don't want to say silly one because it's timely within our, but let's just say of the
You
corona
cut out for a
vaccine.
second. I lost you at let's just say. So what was that again?
Okay,
Sorry.
let's just say that a parent went and got 2 corona vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And they weren't sure. They were uncomfortable about getting the third one. Like, if we got 2, we have to get a third. So what does
Mm-hmm.
it mean about the 2?
Right.
And they weren't sure they wanted to get it or not. But if what they could share is, I'm uncomfortable, I don't know what to do, I have to think about what to do, I have an uncomfortable feeling. That's a parent sharing that they're uncomfortable.
Mm.
If a parent in Los Angeles, we have a lot of homeless people, is walking down the street with their kids and sees a homeless person and says, I'm uncomfortable staying on this side of the street, he scares me a bit, let's cross.
Mm-hmm.
It's a parent identifying uncomfortable feeling and acting on it.
Right. Teaching the
Well,
children what that feeling is. That they might have the feeling, but no idea how to label it or what to do with it. Giving them the terminology to deal with that a little more. Mm.
and when a parent sees that a child's uncomfortable, help them identify that. Are you feeling uncomfortable with that?
Mm. Interesting.
And then respect their discomfort. For instance, you know, I live in Los Angeles. My grandchildren are all either on the East Coast or in Eretz Yisrael.
Mm-hmm.
The older ones know me so well. The little ones, especially with COVID, less so, right?
Right. Sure. Sure.
If I walk in, they may be like, they don't want to be kissed. They don't know me as well, right?
Right. Right.
It's important to pay attention to that and to step back. When a parent will say, go kiss your bubby, go
Right.
push, kiss your bubby, that's the only respectful thing to do. It's not respecting the discomfort.
Mm.
Respecting the discomfort would be saying, she's uncomfortable, maybe later she'll feel more like it.
Right. Right. That's a great point. I feel like it's very common when parents, whether they're with their friends or their aunts or their uncles or their grandparents, they say like, "Go give a kiss," like that's the way to do it, or like give a high five, give it, pound it, whatever it is. It's very common for parents to push that, and especially when children are not feeling comfortable. But parents don't really, don't always, tap into that, and that's such an important point. Thank you for sharing that. Wow. And so, just going back one thing, when you were saying about parents talking, using those opportunities. Like when you're buying a bathing suit, whatever it is, what age would you say should parents start talking to children about boundaries, about their bodies, those types of things?
Okay, I lost you. You said about boundaries, about
Yes. What age would you say that parents should start talking to their children about their boundaries and their bodies and those types of things? What's the proper age to start talking to them?
very young, very young. And it's so much easier when they're young. When
Mm-hmm.
you say things like, oops, those are your private parts. We have to keep them covered. Nobody ever has the right to touch you in the private areas of your body or look at your private areas or talk about your private areas. If they do, that's a do tell. You have to tell mommy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a simple conversation to have with a little one who doesn't know the difference. When they get bigger and you're just validating it, it's not frightening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how does that conversation, or I guess, what does that conversation look like um, at that age, as they get older? I guess, meaning obviously the conversation shifts. Are there certain things that we shouldn't be saying to children? What is too much info? What is scary to tell them? What's the best way to handle those conversations? I guess obviously, like you were saying, when they're younger, it's like, easy to say it in certain ways, but as they get older, certain things without saying it in a way that's going to scare them too much. Like what's that balance?
Sometimes they can tell you the balance. When you see a child's not comfortable,
Uh huh.
then they can show you what the balance is. But I'm going to say that most kids, I don't find that kids don't want their parent to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
If a parent is talking about inappropriate things, there may be that's an odd situation
Right.
out. But as kids, it really is about telling children that in whatever way they say it, as long as it's natural, as long as the kids don't feel like, oh God, my parents are calling me in for a conversation. They hate that. So you have
Right.
to find a place to have it, like maybe going to camp, where you'd say nobody should touch or look at, talk about your body. And even if girls are playing games or boys are playing games or whatever, you can't look at or touch or talk about anybody else's body.
Right. Right.
And no one should show you there's yours. And, sometimes in camp, there are games that kids play. Boys pull pants, pull bathing suits
Sure.
down.
Sure.
It's a game we shouldn't play. What would you do? What
Right.
would you do if it happened to you? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And those are conversations that happen over time. When they get a bit older, it's really a wonderful opportunity to talk about puberty and the
Mm-hmm.
changes puberty brings.
Right.
We highly advise that fathers have discussions with their sons about not asking anybody else to look at, touch, or talk about their body, the sons, and that they can't do it to anybody else. And
Mm-hmm.
to be very specific, that means your sister, that means a cousin, that means a friend. And if you ever struggle with that, I want you to come tell me.
Mm-hmm.
If it's ever a struggle, because
We
boys
lost you
do
for a
have
second.
these
If it's ever
issues,
a struggle, that what?
you should come talk to me. I'm going to
Uh-huh.
help.
And when you're saying, talking to them, that if there's ever a struggle, regarding what? A struggle in what
That
way?
means that a very significant area of concern in the frum community involves molestation between siblings
Mm-hmm.
or cousins, right? Um, what we are saying is we tell all the kids, if anybody does these things to you, come tell us immediately. And it's been pretty amazing the amount of kids that have come forward and said to their
Right.
parents, you told me to tell you
I'm
this,
telling you.
and it really happened,
Right.
right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Um, but we have to take windows of opportunities to teach kids things at different times.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, one father we spoke to before his son went off to yeshiva, his son went off for ninth grade. He was from, a Western town, and his kid went off in ninth grade. And I said, you need to have that conversation with him. And he did. And he talked about Bachram and what happens and all of that. And his son called him up Yom Kippur night, after Yom Kippur, the next
Right.
night, and
Right.
said, last night, this guy came into my room and this is what he did. And I yelled like you said I should. And I got out. And he said he went out and the only place he could go was into the base medrash. And he sat in his pajamas in the base medrash until a Rebbe walked in and he said, this is what,
Wow.
going back into his room. But his
Wow.
kid knew what to do.
Right. Right. Wow. That's crazy.
But you have to, if you don't have these conversations before they go to yeshiva or before they go to seminary, where are they going to learn this?
Right.
Don't you want them to come back to you as a parent?
Sure. Right. Right. That's very true. That's very true. Wow. I I guess the other thing is, but before, obviously the best thing to do, the best case scenario is to preventative, to catch it before, like we're saying. But what about, what are some ways that parents and educators can do a better job of picking up on cues of, once maybe there's something happening. What are those? What do those cues look like, and how can parents and educators, pick up on them better?
It's a really important question. Something we teach parents and educators about at great length. I'm going to be real quick here, but we teach at great length is understanding grooming behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Because the majority of molestation in the frum community is not what we call a grab and snatch. In the middle of the night, someone comes in, grabs a person, molests them, and puts them back in their world. It's
Right.
not what it is. They've all been groomed.
Interesting.
And so it's that next step in that special relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So what we teach teachers, both in terms of themselves and students and being aware of things, but also in terms of them picking things up that the students may share or that they may see. And for parents is to understand the grooming process. That
Mm-hmm.
grooming process is a very slow process where a groomer actually can reach out to many, many kids and see who actually really responds to him,
Interesting.
right?
Hmm.
And a groomer will start out just by developing a relationship and also possibly developing a relationship with the parent. So the parent will trust them as well.
Interesting.
Uh,
Hmm.
yeah. For instance, a case of, let's say, a Rav and one of his own kids, like he has, all of his kids are going to Riverdale, right? And one of his kids wears the pink shirt and whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so a member of the community says, I see he's different than the others. Why don't I take him to baseball games? Wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
that be a nice thing to do? Why don't I take him here? Why don't I do this with him? Why? You have to really watch those special relationships. What I
Mm-hmm.
say is, frankly, adults need to play with adults and kids need to play with kids.
Right. Right. Right.
Adults need their relationships to be with other adults,
Mm-hmm.
and they shouldn't needs met through kids. So as parents and as teachers, we have to watch those relationships that kids are in. They slowly develop a relationship where the child becomes dependent on their giving and their caring of the child. And then it slowly goes to the point where it becomes physical. Once that relationship, and even when it becomes physical, starts out so safe, on the cheek, on the head, a good bear hug, right?
Right.
And then it's down and becomes inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
What kid to do? The whole time this person's been so nice to him, so
Right.
good
Right.
to
Right. Right.
him, and then it becomes inappropriate. How does a child say no,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Well, how do you do that? You said before that a lot of it was within siblings. Some, not all of them, but there are a number of cases like that. So how do you, what do you do to prevent? Or I guess how do you pick up on those cues when siblings do hang out and they play together or whatever it is? So how do you what do you do to pick up on those cues and I guess then prevent it?
Right. So part of what we talk about with parents is creating a safe home,
Mm-hmm.
which means that parents do need to make sure that both their sons and their daughters know the rules. No one's allowed to touch, look at, or talk about private areas of the body. You look or have anybody do that to you, and you can't do it to anybody else. What would you do if anybody ever tried to do that or talked about doing that? If
Right.
anybody. So you might say to your child, so that would mean, what if an uncle tried to do that? What would you do? You'd have to say no and come tell me. What if your own brother tried? What would you do? Right, you'd say no, you'd come tell me. What if somebody in the family said, but I'm allowed to? Is that okay? They'll say no and come tell me,
Right. Right.
right? And you bring up, what if it was a teacher? or a Rebbe or a Mora, what would you do? It's
Mm-hmm.
all the same. The rule is the same for everybody. You
Right.
need to say no and tell them. What if they threatened you and they said, if you tell, I'm going to get you in so much trouble and I'm going to tell, what would you do? Always come tell me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always going to take care of you. You're my priority. I'll
Right.
believe you always.
In
If
terms
you
of
don't have these conversations, you put them in a vulnerable place. The
right,
other piece is physical
is physical what? Sorry.
supervision.
Uh huh. What do you mean by that? Meaning like just watching them.
Right. And, one woman called me after I gave a workshop and she told me, could I please add to my works that parents, when they get up at night to go to the bathroom, or if a parent goes to sleep late, and give them a kiss. Children should know that when the door closes at night, it's not closed for the night, that it can open
Mm-hmm.
because parents check on their kids. And you shouldn't check on it in terms of take a flashlight and say, who's in here? I'm checking.
All
But
right.
it needs to be that loving kiss. But they need to know
Right.
that even when the door closes, that it can open.
That's a great point. That's a really, really great point. Wow. And, I guess what would you say um, are the most important skills that you can recommend to just to our community as a whole to, put a realistic stop? I guess you're saying you've been saying a lot about, having preventative conversations, but what other skills to really, really put a realistic stop to get a stop to having these horrific things happening within our community?
It's a hard question,
Yeah.
but I do feel that if communities work together, where we have administrators, staff, parents, and kids educated, that are educated, that we come closer to creating a community where a predator is not likely to come. They
Mm-hmm.
don't want to get caught. They don't
Right.
want to get caught. So if this guy is spending way too much time with these kids, and that happens fast, and the rabbi can deal with it
Mm-hmm.
and say, we don't spend with kids. Adults have to be with the adults, and kids have to be with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a problem and it keeps recurring, then the rabbi has to figure out how to deal with that. It
Right.
may be communicating to make it a safer community. And the Rabbanim are going to have to, many communities have, but I truly believe that this world, based on what has just happened with Chaim Walder, this world is going to be a different world for the Frum people.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has truly shown people what can happen to our children with people we trust.
Right.
And I think that every community is going to want to look at how do we protect our children. And more Rabbanim are going to get together and figure out what are the processes we need to do when a case comes to us.
Right. Right. So I guess going back for a second, we've been saying how a lot about how adults should be with adults and kids should be with kids, but in camps and in shuls, specifically, I guess also in schools, but more so in camps and in shuls, where often you have kids with adults and shuls. You have the kids with youth leaders, youth directors, camps with their counselors in the bunks and things like that. How do we create a safer environment there with where it's built in that they're supposed to be like that?
So I do believe, I know we came up with something called Project Safe Camp, where we were doing trainings with counselors and directors.
Mm-hmm.
There are other programs out there as well that do trainings, but it really puts the responsibility on the directors to be supervising the counselors as well and looking out for those special relationships that look like there could
Mm-hmm.
be something going on there that's wrong.
Interesting.
Um, and I think that intensive trainings with counselors is important. They are young. They're 16, 17, or 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So they need to be trained, but the people who supervise them also have to be trained.
Right. Right. Right.
The other thing I'm just going to say is, I'm going to get on my soapbox a minute, and say that I truly believe that if every parent said, um, I'd like to send my kid to your camp, can you tell me what are your safety protocol? That every camp would have safety protocol.
Mm,
But today, my
yeah.
parents are saying, I need to get to your camp. What in the world do I need to do to get my kid?
Right. Right.
And I all need to focus on making sure that camps have safety protocol and supervision.
Right.
I
Right.
believe more and more of them do.
Yeah. No, I've worked at camps, and we have a mandatory training, but I don't know if that's the case in necessarily every camp, and that's a very good point. It's a very, very good
Mhm.
point. Would you say that the statistics of abuse in the Jewish community, I guess, what are they? Are they more towards sexual abuse? Is it the other areas of abuse? Is it more common within our community, or not necessarily?
These are questions I can't really answer accurately. I don't know how accurate there are. People, Yitzi Schechter has done, I think, some really intensive work around, and I'd say probably has some of the best statistics that are out there. I think
Hmm.
maybe Amudim may have done some as well,
Right.
have their statistics.
Hmm.
I guess the statistic that I do have certain statistics, but what I would say, the statistic that I say is one child of ours is affected. It's one too many because it affects them for life.
Right.
Um, are our statistics higher or lower? I would say that it's very hard to tell because I think there's a lot more disclosure than there used to be.
Mm,
So does that mean there's more or less, or does it mean more disclosing? I will
interesting.
tell you something that I find sad all the time is that when I go do a staff workshop or a parent workshop, when that workshop is over, there are generally lines of people, almost all of them disclosing, often for the first time, their own molestation.
Wow, that's crazy. That's horrible.
Yeah, the parents are disclosing that which happened to them.
Yeah, that's wow. That's crazy. Wow. So why does it? I don't know why, but I guess I always feel, and I get the sense that others feel as well, that it's more common within our community. Like, why does it feel that way? Is that just because that's how we look at it, or it just is it that how it's presented? I don't know what it is.
Well, it does hurt more when it's ours. That's
Mm-hmm.
true. Our children have additional challenges because of the separation between the sexes. Um, and so there's additional challenges.
Right.
Uh, you know, I don't know. I don't think that there are higher statistics in the frum community, but again, I don't want to answer a question I don't really have the answer
Sure.
for.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
There,
Oh.
like I said, there really are people who I think could answer it well.
Mm-hmm.
I think YU's done some statistics on it, um, but I don't have that answer.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Are there any other resources that you would recommend for parents to, I guess, to read or to get access to, in terms of this in this area?
Well, there are good books for kids
Mm-hmm.
that parents should be reading to kids in a natural way. It's a good book to read and to have conversations with, which is Yankee Horowitz's Let's Stay Safe. Rabbi
Mm.
Yaakov Horowitz's Let's Stay
Sure.
Safe.
Sure.
And Rabbi Moshe Bach has Private Places.
Mm.
Those are both very good books. I think Brecha Getz on her own may have some books as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think those are good books and great opportunities for talking. Um, I I think that there are other programs out there. I don't know right now because some of them have come and gone over time. I
Right.
don't know what other programs are out there right now. But in terms of resources, certainly if a parent is worried that something may have happened to their own child, I would definitely suggest they call either Relief for Referrals or call Amudim, who really has incredible resources as well.
Right. 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 Sure. So I know that you work with many different types of communities, some which are sometimes less transparent, more insular. How have the various communities been receptive to your work? And I guess also have you had to tweak or change your presentations or your work based on that, or your practice in any way?
That's a great question. We started out with a very modern Orthodox version
Hmm.
because they were the only ones who would let us in.
Really?
And then, yeah, and
I
then
guess that's
once,
not so surprising, but
no, this is also 10 or 12 years ago that we,
sure.
right? And then the more yeshivish community wanted the program, but they didn't want all of our artwork and everything.
Hmm.
So we have a yeshivish safety kit,
Uh-huh.
right? He's more yeshivish, the whole program. He's more like black velvet yarmulke and like a vest, whereas uh, the other has more fatigues and that kind of thing. So
Right,
he's a
right.
little more yeshivish.
Hmm.
And then what happened was the Hasidish world wanted the program.
Hmm.
And that has been incredible. It's been an incredible experience. We spent over 2 years developing the program.
Wow.
There was a wonderful kind of back and forth about how to say things and how we can say things and what we can show and what we can't and all of that. But it was really interesting that they would tell me the sensitivity, but they always gave me the final word. They went to their dayanim. They wouldn't say anything in a way I didn't feel was appropriate. But I do want to say one thing that's incredible. Their pictures show specifically
Wait,
a
we lost you for
brother
a
and a
second.
sister.
Their pictures, what? Sorry.
Show specifically a brother and a sister.
Hmm.
Most yeshivish communities would not have wanted us to show a picture specifically of a brother and a sister
Right.
in the same room. But their dayanim said, if this is the biggest problem, you must
Show
talk
it.
about it.
Wow. Wow.
And so they
That's
did that.
amazing.
They also have a picture of grooming in a base medrash of somebody giving chocolate to another boy in a base medrash, which
Hmm.
is very practical. It's very practical, their program. Totally in Yiddish. They've given it all over the New York area. I think they've given it in some other areas. And they've actually taken the program they went to Belgium. And now the whole program is in Flemish.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
so
so cool.
they are wonderful. I speak to them all the time. They've really taken seriously the issue of how to deal with a perpetrator if it comes up. They've taken it very seriously. So
Hmm.
they've dealt with all kinds of issues in camps. They've really taken it very seriously.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. That's
Mhm,
incredible.
mhm.
What would you say is the best way for educators and parents to best meet the social and emotional needs of their students and children?
You know, I think, like I said, of educators, um, you're with them more hours a day than anybody else.
Right.
And I think having good boundaries, but showing them care, concern, and respect,
Hmm.
I think that's really what, so that's what they need in a relationship from you, that you know your boundaries, you know what your role is in their life. You don't get into other roles in their lives, but you are able to communicate with them and leave the door open for them to tell you when there are issues of concern.
Hmm. For sure.
Um, I think with parents, it really is a lot of what we've been talking about, which is really just opening the conversations with them and being respectful that when they come back to you, and that if they do have something to say, that you stay very, very calm
Mm.
and that you respond in a way that allows them to continue. They tell the parent, they won't continue. They'll renege on what they've said.
Right. Right. For sure. For sure. Yeah. No. It's a big topic in terms of like how to create that safe environment for them to speak and feel they can really that they're being heard, and that they can continue talking. It's a it's a hard thing, but it's super important.
Mm-hmm.
Super important. As we wrap up, I'm curious to hear if there's any practices in your home that you've learned or used from your role over the years, not just in terms of this specific area, but also as being a social worker, a licensed social worker, like different things from your role as a social worker with your Magen Yeladim, things that you've brought into your home over the years.
I'll tell you like two little stories that probably will bring that out. One of them was I have had discussions with my grandchildren. At this point, I don't have children in the house, but my grandchildren
Sure.
over time about these rules. So one of the things is like we tell children that when they go anywhere into, let's say, a store, or they go into a park with their parents during Cholamoid or whatever, they have to know who the safe helpers would be. So in Target, somebody in a red shirt. If you
Mm,
walk into Disneyland or Disney World, what do the safe helpers here look like? So you want them
interesting.
to know what an employee looks like, and that
Mm,
they have to stay in an open area. They can never go anywhere with anybody
right.
alone. They have to stay
Mm,
in open areas. We
great
tell them.
point.
So my grandchildren, when we drive up, you hear them all going, okay, green shirts, are you happy now? So they'll tease me, but the bottom line is they all know it.
They know it, right?
They
That's
all
amazing.
know they are. And it was interesting because one of my grandchildren, we went into this small restaurant um, in Passaic, and he looks at me and he goes, the people behind the counter and stuff, they don't have like a colored shirt that we know. So how do we know if they're safe helpers? I said, that's such a good question, but anybody who's by the cash register
Mm,
is watching the money.
right.
So they have to stay there. So that would be a safe person to go to.
Hmm.
But they ask the questions,
Right,
right?
right. Just the fact that you're planting that seed in their head, that's amazing.
Right. The other thing I was going to say is with one of my own kids, you know, my kids are now older than I want to acknowledge with their own families, right?
Sure.
And one of them was, um, as they were growing up, I used to go over this stuff with them, this information with them, and that you yell no and you come and you tell mommy and tati. You have to, if anything were to ever happen, you yell no, you come and you tell mommy and tati. And it just so happens that, okay, so we said that a lot when they were younger. Um, and so happens that one of my kids went to BMG.
Mm,
More than one of my kids went there, but one of my kids went to BMG.
sure.
And one morning I get a call and he goes, Mom, craziest thing happened. Last night I was sleeping and some guy came. He ripped off my blanket, started to touch me. I screamed, no. And the guy just ran away. I just thought I'd tell you. Now, I
Wow.
want to tell you what I find fascinating by that. I don't believe my kid is the only kid in BM that ever happened to.
Oh, I'm sure.
Do believe he's probably the only one who called his mom the next morning.
Right. That's probably true.
And the reason is it was you yell no and you tell. I don't think he knew what he was doing. I don't think he did.
It was just
And
automatic.
automatic. That's what
Wow.
you do.
Hmm.
And so I think if we keep it cool, we don't want to overdo it, but if we keep it cool and we have these discussions and you validate what they say. I used to say that one of my kids, we'd had this discussion when he was little and he was in preschool. Every time anybody went into a bathroom, I knew that was a private part. So I knew anybody who went into a bathroom, all we did is say, thank you. Thanks for telling us. I mean, it was
Right.
still no, I didn't need to know,
Right.
but
Right.
we validated.
Right.
So
Right.
I those things are important.
Yeah. Yeah. Very important. Thank you so much for taking the time and really educating us on these incredibly important points and so many fascinating insights and really important things for parents and educators and Rabbanim to know. And really, thank you again for taking the time.
Sure. Okay, great.